And hello again. Welcome to the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. My name is Randy Cook. I'm here each week with Mark as we talk through some of the issues of retirement. This time of year, we get a little sentimental. We start thinking about family. We start thinking about our future, what the new year looks like. Well, when you start to get into your 60s, you start to think a little bit further than that. You start to think about retirement, and not just next year, but maybe the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And that is why we are here to talk through some of those things. Marc Oslar is here to talk through some of those things as well. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Randy. I'll tell you, we're gearing up for Christmas here, aren't we?
Absolutely. And I've been told, don't go in that closet or don't go in that room because there's gifts in there and they're not wrapped yet. So I imagine that's happening at your house as well.
Oh, yeah. You might have to grab a kid or two, maybe tie them up or something,
Yeah, it's a fun time of year, that is for sure. But I do have my Christmas shopping done. I went to Dick's Sporting Goods the other day, and I walked in, and the line was like all the way around, and I was like, oh, boy. So I shopped for a while and shopped for a little longer and shopped for a little longer, and pretty soon that line went down. So that timed out pretty good. All right, well.
Yeah, Dick's is one of those places.
It is. Boy, there's a lot going on there for sure. But what we want to do is get you through the retirement line here and figure out what we can do to help. And that is why Mark is here. We encourage you to use the website. Go to more2retire.com. Find out more about Mark. And if it's time to talk about your retirement and actually get something down on paper, give him a call. We do a no-cost, no-obligation meeting, and we'll talk more about that. But I'm going to give you the number right now, 984-300-1984. Pretty quick. 984-300-1984. So write that one down as we go through the show here. So we are getting toward the end of the year, and I think we can probably safely say that this will be the third year in a row that the stock market has been up double digits. And that has happened about 11 times over about 100 years. So then, of course, the next question is, can we do it again? How many times has the market gone up 4 years in a row? Not just double digit, but just simply 4 years in a row. The answer to that is 4 times in 100 years. So the odds are against us having another double-digit year or even an up year next year. I was looking at one survey, and 75% of the investors in this survey said they're going to back off on their equity positions, their risk positions, their market positions next year. So I wanted to ask you, as people come in now, is that a concern? Is that something that you're hearing, Mark? Are they a little worried about the future of the stock market?
Yeah, I hear that from some folks. And to be honest with you, if you're looking to retire, obviously, you want to diversify your investments, but hey, do you need to have all your money in the market? That's like one of the big questions, right, Randy? Mm-hmm. So when we discuss this and we talk about this, one of the things I'm thinking about is, should we be banking our entire investment portfolio on a 4%, capability of what the future might hold, or maybe 5% if it actually happens, right? Now, I have no problem with investing in the market, investing in the future of our economy and those things. It's fantastic. But when you gear up and you're getting closer to retirement, making plans for retirement, all that stuff, we need to have certain conversations about where does the money need to be strategically. So that's why we talk about this acronym in here that we like to use, the PIG acronym, Preservation, Income, and Growth. And we discuss this because it's paramount. It's paramount to retirement planning. Why is it paramount to retirement planning? Because if we're talking about preserving what you worked your whole life for, then you're not trying to accumulate as much as possible because you've already built that point, right? So maybe put in some preservation tactics. And then what's so important about the income? Well, it's everything in retirement. Can we count on Social Security fully? No. I mean, obviously, if we don't fix the system, everybody's Social Security could be reduced by 20%. So obviously, just kind of chop that off the top and just make sure that we're doing the right planning for you. So with income, we got to prepare for inflation and taxes. And then growth. What's a good, sensible growth in retirement? So these are the things we discuss, talk about, and we try to figure out what's going to be the best case scenario. And I certainly don't want to bank it on, can the market be up 4 years in a row, double digits, when it's happened 4 times in the last 100 years.
Right. And I mean, this is a huge discussion, this idea about risk. And we talk about it all the time about dialing back your risk as you get toward retirement. I mean, when you're in if the stock market were a pool, in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, you cannonball into the deep end. But when you're in your 50s and 60s and 70s, maybe you're just kind of dipping your toe in that pool, or maybe just sitting on the side with your legs kind of in there, just like we do it when we sit in the sun. You got to figure out exactly where you are comfortable. And that's a discussion with Marc and the team. And to sit down and have that discussion, 984-300-1984. Maybe you're very risk averse, as they say. Your whole life, I've never bought a stock. I've just put money in my 401k. I've just saved money. Okay, you're probably not going to be that person who depends on the stock market for your retirement. But there are other people that do, and everybody's different. Let's get that locked down. Moretoretire.com is the website. Moretoretire.com. There's a place there for you to put some information down at the bottom of the page. Marc and the team will reach out to you, or you can just call right now. It's 984-300-1984. All right, so it is Christmas time, and you turn on the radio or turn on anything that you're listening to, and you're going to hear All I Want for Christmas Is You, because that's probably the most requested song. It's, of course, from Mariah Carey. And at this time of year, in the month of December, Mariah Carey makes $2 to $3 million on royalties just on that one song. It's pretty amazing. So when I think about that, in some ways you say Mariah Carey is getting paid on something she did years ago, right? Well, that's kind of retirement. We are getting paid on work that we did years ago. We've been saving and saving and saving. So let's talk a little bit about what I refer to as retirement royalties. There's a difference, Marc, between having a savings account and pulling money off the top, or having an asset that actually kicks off money, kicks off income, kicks off a paycheck. So talk to me about that and how you figure out the income part of the puzzle in retirement planning.
Sure. So, one of the things we like to discuss, and we're talking about income, right? And we're talking about preservation, and we're talking about growth, and we're discussing all these different things and why the preservation tactic is important for the income portion. Well, we talked about sequence of returns in here before, right, Randy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's basically, for example, let's just say you take 5 numbers, okay? 5 returns per year. You say 10% year, one particular year, then -7% the next year, then +8, then +6, and then -15. Okay. You take those. But then if you switch them around in different years and you're taking withdrawals in the 2 different columns, did you know that they could be drastically different with regards to what you have left? Yes. They could be drastically different. And I can share that information with you when you come into my office about how we discuss that, because it's important. Because that means that, let's just say, for example, the market drops in one year in particular versus another as you're taking withdrawals, it could have a drastic effect on the bottom line, which means what? If you have less money to work with, then that means you have less withdrawal to take from, which means that it's going to take a higher percentage to withdraw from that figure. So if you're taking 5%, so which is out of $100,000, that's $5,000, right? What's 5% of $80,000? That's $4,000. So we're saying, okay, that means we have to take a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Well, that can add up. And so we like to look at preservation tactics for income. And this is I do have a motto. Okay, people say, "Oh, you're pretty open to whatever the person thinks." I certainly am. It just depends on your risk tolerance, right? But I do have a motto, and that is, look, if we're going to get income, I want to be certain about how we're taking the income, whether it's certainly from, let's just say, a lifetime income rider based on an annuity that has a rider built in to give somebody some type of lifetime income, or if it's based on preservation tactics where we can be a little bit more comfortable knowing we could take, 4% out of the money because maybe it's built with some kind of other rider built in, like the family endowment rider that I know is with another company that rolls up at a certain percentage. Or maybe it's built on the fact that we look at sensible indexes and we know that, they've averaged, let's just say, certain percentages, and we can take a certain percentage out. Or let's just say in another case, you have a multi-year guarantee annuity, which is very similar to a CD, or you have a CD and that percentage you can take out. So these are the conversations we have, because if we're going to take income from something, we want to be sure it's certain. So if we're talking about royalties, you've built up these buckets of monies over the years, right? Shouldn't we certainly take maybe some preservation tactics on some of the money that we're pulling income from? And then the rest can be gravy. Now, we don't have to be all in, hey, let's have this high risk, but we certainly can have some really good returns in the market and balance the risk as well. So for me, if it's about income, I'm always thinking preservation because that's important to me because I know that I can lay my head on the pillow at night knowing you're not going to come after me after that one.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to get paid in retirement, and I think most of us think Social Security and what am I going to do with my 401k? But there's also pensions and annuities and structured notes and dividend-paying stocks and part-time work and real estate. There's a lot of different ways to get paid in retirement. Have you explored all of them? Do you know what those options are out there and what fits your particular style in retirement? There's a lot of things to talk about, and it's not just stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. It's not just Social Security and my 401k. There are so many things out there to explore. Let's get that all out on the table and find out what's right for you. The only way to do that is really to sit down and have a discussion about your retirement and talk about the math. What does the math look like? Moretoretire.com. is the website, moretoretire.com. Start there, tool around, learn more about Marc, and at the bottom of the page is a place for you to put a little information in there. Marc will reach out to you. There's no obligation here. There's no cost here. It's really just a conversation about what you want to do in retirement, what your questions are. Let's get it out on the table. Moretoretire.com or 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984. All right, 51-year-old woman writes into the Market Watch Advisor column, and she says this: I've been able to buy one Bitcoin. It cost me $48,000. It then went down to $16,000. It's currently much higher than that now. So she's doing well. She says she has her entire retirement that she considers the Bitcoin her retirement fund. And she's okay with the up and the down of it because she thinks it's going to have such a big upside. You hear these stories of Bitcoin going up to 200,000. Maybe that works. Maybe it doesn't. The advisor who wrote back to her said this: Bitcoin's fine, but having all your eggs in that basket, a very volatile basket, might be something you want to reconsider. Would that be about the same thing you tell her?
100%. Yeah, you're talking about a 51-year-old person putting all their retirement assets in Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin is volatile, right? And it's one coin in particular. If you told me you had a bunch of coins, that would be a little bit more diversified, but still, you're all in crypto. You can't rely on retiring on cryptocurrency. I mean, that's just not simply a smart move. Obviously, we want to look at real strategies when you get closer and closer. Is it okay right now? If you're okay with going up and down, sure. But at some point, you're going to have to come to that point where you realize that, hey, I need a real asset, I need real income, and I have a real future ahead of me because I understand how I've developed a plan behind that. Other than that, it's just simply too much risk. Well, we have, Randy, we have an entire portfolio of things. You mentioned a bunch of different things we talked about before. Well, I mentioned before preservation, income, and growth, right? Preservation, income, and growth. So we're talking about some of our proprietary stuff we have with Market Guard. So some of the proprietary stuff we have with Market Guard, we have a pure equity model. Now, that could be a little bit aggressive for people if they haven't built in some fixed income. Well, we also have several other things that we have in-house, and you mentioned structured notes. Structured notes can be used to break up correlation. Correlation means that you have maybe too many stocks moving in the same direction, and if we have a correction in the market, you could feel it pretty heavily. And so we want to break up correlation. We might break it up with structured notes, but we could also build income off of structured notes as well. That's another avenue to break up correlation and maybe build income. We also do have a crypto platform as well, but that's also managed as well. So these are different areas that we look at. We have some nice ETF models. What we try to do is we try to keep down the internal expense ratio because the biggest fee we want you to see is the percentage fee that we charge from the fiduciary standard of care. Now, go ahead, Randy. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, somebody who's 50 years old, they may think that they can handle the volatility, but if 5-10 years from now, Bitcoin disappears or Bitcoin collapses and you're 55 years old and all your eggs are in that basket, I would say 50 years old is where you probably want to start paying attention to a little less risk as you move toward your 60s. She's at that point now where she probably can't afford to have everything in a real volatile basket.
I agree completely. The conversation really is, can she handle that conversation? Because if she came in my office and said, you know what, I'm going to stick with what I'm doing, I'm going to say, well, we're just not a fit.
Yeah.
Because at some point you're going to have to diversify and get some places and some monies in different spots, like we talked about, and that's really important. But I'm talking about some of the market money we have. But if you want to get a little more conservative, we have all the insurance products too that we discuss. From an independent standard, we like to share with you a software so we can show you and be transparent. By showing you the software, this way we're not just giving you a simple recommendation. We're sharing with you everything we possibly can so you understand the difference between what's out there versus what we think could be a potential fit for you. So for us, it's about planning. And if you're coming to me for planning and you're telling me you're putting all your money in one basket, then it's just not going to work, Randy. It's not going to work. And we want to build preservation tactics for you in retirement.
One of the things that worries me just about the word Bitcoin is everybody's infatuated with how much growth it's had. And who wouldn't be? I understand that completely. But now they have Bitcoin mutual funds. And then they also have, President Trump just this week signed the papers that you can put Bitcoin and private equity into 401ks. And that's going to make it more mass appeal when you see it in a 401k. That doesn't mean it's any less volatile. Can you decrease some of the risk of something like Bitcoin by having a portfolio like you're talking about with Market Guard or some of these other ways? Bitcoin is Bitcoin. It's just going to be that kind of an investment, isn't it?
Yes, and in our pure equity model, we move it around every 3 months. Mm-hmm. So quarterly, it's rebalanced. It's changed all the time. 6 months ago, we had 52% in mid-cap, and when you look now, there's only about 12% in mid-cap. We've switched quite a bit. There's about 88% in large cap.
Interesting.
The adjustments are real, and there's a reason and a science behind it. That's why we use the chartered financial analyst to make these decisions. And what we do is try to put you in the right buckets and places based on your risk tolerance. So this is real. And Look, I had a guy come to me, client of mine. He has some annuities. He has some CDs. He's real conservative. Mm-hmm. He doesn't want any more money in the market. I get it. He has a little brokerage portfolio, maybe $50K. And then he had some money in the bank. He was like, I got about $50K I want to do something with. I said, what are you trying to do? He said, well, I wouldn't mind a little risk, but what could make me a lot of money? I said, well, look, I'm not going to give you advice. I'm just going to tell you, if you were looking to potentially make a bunch of money, and this is 2020.
Yeah.
I said, Bitcoin's like 17,000 now. And if you don't mind the volatility, you can look at that. You can go look at that. And now look at where Bitcoin is now. But he always comes back to me. He says, Mark, I should have done that. I said, well, I didn't give you advice. I just told you, hey, look at it. It's probably kind of low right now. You might want to mess around with that. Maybe take a look at it. And so we just joke about that. But in general, putting all your assets in Bitcoin, that's absolutely crazy. That's not a plan. That's you're planning to fail when you do something like that because you're not ready. You're not ready to prepare for retirement.
Well, we talk about hope, and hope is not a good strategy. We all hope that our investments go up, but if they don't, then what? And honestly, having a meeting with Mark is the and then what meeting. To say what if. What if inflation goes up? What if taxes go up? What if the market goes down? What if they cut back Social Security? These are really good questions for a meeting with Mark. And having the what ifs taken care of and in your portfolio really could get you into retirement with a lot more confidence. Let's have that meeting. MoreToRetire.com is the website. Check Mark out today or give him a call. It's 984-300-1984. We offer a no-cost, no-obligation meeting to just talk about your questions about retirement and see if you're a good fit with Mark. Again, 984-300-1984. Well, I've got 3 kids, grown kids now. Mark's got 4 kids, and a couple of them are in the college age area. And if somebody came up to you, Mark, and said, I'm having a little trouble with my kids and giving them the talk, then your eyes get wide and go, oh, that's That's a moment not every parent likes, right? I remember, because I'm Lutheran, and I taught confirmation for years, and I taught middle school kids. And every time we got around to the seventh commandment, they looked at me and go, "Randy, you take this one," which is the one about adultery and sex. And I had to talk to middle school kids about sex, and I got pretty good at it after a while. But then I'm in the minivan with my three kids, age 3, 6, and 7, and somebody in the back of the minivan goes, "Dad, where do babies come from?" And I'm going, "Are you kidding me? We're going to have this conversation now?" But the talk is it's one of those conversations that you don't want to have, but there's another version of the talk that happens when you get into retirement. And that is when you start to build a will, you start to build a legacy plan, estate planning issues, all these different things. How much do you share with your adult children? And I've got a stat here. It says of 70% of people who created a will, 68% of them did not share the details with their kids. I find that interesting. So, Mark, this is a part of retirement planning. We do the investments, we do the taxes, we do the Social Security, we get all these things, and then we have to start talking about this. Do you find that people want to share that information with their kids, or how much do they share with their adult kids?
Yeah, I'd say that less than half the time I see folks coming in and doing some estate planning, they've shared this information with kids. Mm-hmm. What happens is it's usually as they age up, they begin to, but not always.
Yeah.
They don't always. I think some of it's a trust factor. I mean, I had a client that lost her husband recently, and they weren't ready to share all their financial details yet, with the oldest son, even though they were confident in the oldest son, they just weren't ready yet. There's just these conversations come up, but the talk is important. So if I start seeing my clients get older and, they've done estate planning, but I realize maybe they shouldn't be sitting with me and making these decisions themselves, based on some of the signs that I see. Mm-hmm. That's when I have a talk with them. And I say, look, probably need to get somebody else involved a little bit, at least to some extent. Let's have a conversation and see where do we navigate and go from here. Because, having this talk about estate planning, having this talk about maybe getting somebody else involved, it's structurally a smart thing to do at some point. Now, if you don't trust your blood kids or you don't trust other relatives, there's other ways to go about it. You can involve the law firm. You can involve a bank. Mm-hmm. Anybody would be glad to be a trustee or whatever else might be to handle your estate. So there's other avenues out there, but we certainly should have a conversation about estate planning because it's important, right? Am I an attorney? No, but I can put you with the attorneys that can form the documents, put everything in place. We like to be a one-stop shop to be able to offer our clients as much as possible in as many different places as possible, right? So having this conversation about, hey, I've got this is available to you, and they will definitely direct you in the right place. And that's all we want to do. We want to be a place where we say, hey, we're doing full comprehensive financial planning, and here are all the different avenues of importance, and we'll involve all the professionals we need to get you in the right place.
Yeah, the legal document part of this is really very important, especially, we talk about, it's not fun to talk about, but having medical directives and, wills are supposed to eliminate the fighting after you're gone. And if the fighting begins, then you've probably not done it the right way. I talked to somebody the other day, just very recently, and he said, so we just set it up this way. If I die, it all goes to her. If she dies, it all goes to me. If we both die, they have to sell everything and split up the money. And if one kid decides he doesn't like it and wants to go to probate, they give up everything. So I thought, that's not too bad. I like that. So eliminate the problems that might happen in the future with the legal documents that you need, and that is certainly a part of the retirement planning process. Give Mark a call, talk through what you need, what he can help direct you toward, and let's get that conversation going as well. 984-300-1984 is the number for the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. You can find him online at moretoretire.com. We talk about income, the PIG. We talk about the income part a lot on this show, but there are some interesting things. The more money you make in retirement, it is seemingly the more you get penalized, the more you get taxed. So is it Mark's job to keep your income down, That doesn't seem right. We'll talk through that one. Coming up next on the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience.
A simple piece of paper. It's something we use every day. For the most part, it does what it's designed to do. It sits there flat on your desk as a placeholder for information. But with a couple strategic folds, suddenly your flat piece of paper becomes an airplane and flies across the room. Your 401k is kind of like that flat piece of paper. It just sits there as a placeholder for your money. Marc Oslar can show you those strategic moves to take your 401k from just sitting there to creating the income you need for retirement. Call today for a free no-obligation meeting. 984-300-1984. That's 984-300-1984. Or online at moretoretire.com.
Welcome back to the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. Online, find Marc at moretoretire.com. If it's time to talk about your retirement, let's get that conversation going. Get some things down on paper. moretoretire.com, a no-cost, no-obligation meeting, or 984-300-1984. We also have a podcast. You can look that up under iTunes and Spotify, and look up the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. You'll hear this show and other shows as well. All right, so when we get into retirement, the more money that you have figured out how to make, the more we seem to get penalized. It's crazy. You know that $6,000 that's in the big, beautiful bill for the deduction for everybody 65 and over? Well, if you make a lot of money, some of that starts going away. You know that your ability to contribute to a Roth, the more money you make, some of that goes away. The more money you make in retirement, the higher they charge you for Medicare. And, of course, then there's the taxing of Social Security. You make more money, then you get taxed more. So, Marc, it's like the more money you make, you get penalized for it. So is it your job to keep my income level down so I don't get taxed so much? Or how do you handle that balancing act that you have to do?
Well, it's funny you bring this up. So I had some clients of mine, they were coming to me and they were thinking about just being more tax efficient because they have so many traditional IRAs and stuff like that. And just having this conversation of how do we keep our income level below $212,000 in a particular year. Well, that's a nice problem to have, right? Yeah. So you're retired to try to stay below $212,000. No, it's truly, yeah. The more your income goes up, the more you could have some penalties. But there are some ways we can go about this and switch up and change some things. So first and foremost, like I said before, we're like this beautiful stop where you come in here and we're a shop where we like to be able to offer you as much as possible by having the right relationships. Well, one of the relationships we have out there is one of our groups that does handle all the different Medicare supplement policies and things like that. And I farm that out to them because they like to spend the time on it. Mm-hmm. Am I licensed to do it? Yes, I am. So I can talk about it. We could discuss things. But do I want to spend the majority of my time doing it? No, because it's a niche. And for me, I want to do what's best for my clients. And what am I good at? I'm good at number crunching. I'm good at the overall plan. I'm good at how to place the money and where to place the money based on the questions you answer for me, the types of income levels we want, all of that good stuff. But we want to involve all the professionals in all the other areas so we can help you get to the place where you need to be. So they can answer a lot of those questions, and I can answer some of them myself from an income standpoint, but obviously I'm also not a tax professional, so sometimes we have to involve a tax professional as well. But do I want to keep your income down in retirement? No, but could we be more tax efficient? Of course we can, always.
Well, there's things that we have to learn in retirement. It's a learning curve. It's like you got to get your retirement IQ up. You know, what's an FRA, full retirement age? Oh, didn't know that. What's an RMD? Required minimum distribution. Oh, didn't know that. Then there's something called provisional income. There's a couple of words that you got to figure out. And that is all these different places where we put money, 401ks and Roths and savings accounts and investments, capital gains. Everything is taxed differently, or many things are taxed differently. Sometimes you're taxed on the gains. Sometimes you're taxed on your withdrawals. Sometimes you add it on the income. And Marc, it just gets confusing. It really does. And to understand what's going to move me into the next tax bracket and what's not, that's probably some pretty valuable information that we need to find.
It is. And I got a client right now that he wants to be more tax efficient, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's got some CDs and money market. He basically has like 1.6 million in the bank. And so we're just having this conversation. That's quite a bit of money in the bank, but there's a purpose behind it. He still wants to buy a little bit of real estate and stuff like that. He still likes to stay healthy in the bank. I said, obviously if you took, $500,000 or $600,000 out of there, if you're not going to spend that on real estate, you could obviously look at a non-qualified annuity. And guess what? That'll change your taxable event quite a bit, because if you're not spending the interest that you're getting off your CDs and your money market, you put into an annuity, it'll grow tax deferred. So now you're not getting hit with the income that you're not even spending. So now we could lower some stuff for you. It's just simple stuff like that can make all the difference. Or maybe you do Roth conversions at a certain age before we start getting up into required minimum distribution age. Because if let's just say you're born in 1960 and you happen to turn 65 this year, you don't have to take a required minimum distribution by the IRS until you're 75. Now, if you're a little older than that, then it's going to be age 73. Once you start taking them, you still can convert to a Roth IRA. You just have to take your required minimum distribution in that particular year first. But having these conversations about when to convert, how to convert, all this stuff, well, we'll just put the information before you, and you'll make those right decisions for yourself, and we'll just be assisting you along the way. But can we go about this? Yeah, there's another one out there. Look, if you're going to work for another 10 years, and I'm serious, if you're going to work for another 10 years, you ought to look at a life insurance policy, because if you make too much money to contribute to an IRA, the only way you could is by doing a backdoor Roth, which is contributing to an IRA and then converting into a Roth. And there are a lot of people that do that, right? But there's limits with that. So the other way we can look at it is, hey, what if we did a life insurance policy? Well, the Internal Revenue Code allows a certain amount of money up to something called a modified endowment contract limit. So the way it works is you buy a life insurance policy, usually universal life, index universal life, or whole life. These are all permanent policies, right? It's just that universal life and index universal life have fluctuation to it, while whole life is more set in stone, at least on the guaranteed side. And on the non-guaranteed side, usually there's a number of years where it has something set up, right? So let's just look at this and understand. When you contribute to a policy like this, what you do is you overfund the policy to build the cash value, but you stay underneath the modified endowment contract limit. And what the Internal Revenue Code allows is withdrawals up to the premiums and tax-free loans after that, income tax-free loans after that. So what happens is this can look like what we like to call a Roth IRA on steroids, because you're not limited with how much you could do in contribution. Obviously, you could increase the death benefit to get a bigger contribution. So these are the conversations we have, because we can be more tax efficient, and there's a lot of different ways to go about it.
Yeah, all our whole life we've been buying life insurance because we didn't want our spouse to be destitute or our kids to be destitute if we die. Now you're thinking about something else, buying a life insurance policy for income later in retirement. It's an interesting change that happens when you get into your retirement years and how things do change. It's a topic you can sure bring up with Marc and see if it's right for you. 984-300-1984 for a meeting. Get a date on a calendar with Marc. You can look up the website as well, moretoretire.com. Well, you mentioned Medicare, and I wanted to ask one question about that because I saw a headline that was kind of disturbing. We are now outside the Medicare window. That ended on December the 7th. So there's a window there between October the 15th and December the 7th when you make your Medicare decisions, Advantage plan, supplemental plans, things like that. Well, the people at United Healthcare, which are a huge carrier in this country, have Advantage plans, and they are sending out letters to about 1 million people, and they're drop-dead letters. They're saying, we are no longer going to let you be on our Advantage plan. And now here you are, outside the window going, what do I do now? What would they do now? Marc, are you in favor of Advantage plan or supplemental plan? Do you lean either way? Do you find that your people choose one or the other? Or do you run into these situations where people all of a sudden are kind of, where do I go with my health care? Because Medicare doesn't cover everything. And some people want to have a little bit of supplemental insurance in order to cover some of the other things.
A lot of times when somebody looks at a Medicare Advantage plan, it's because they're more on a budget, right? Mm-hmm. They might be wanting to save some money. I get it. Or you just have, you're just living off a fixed budget that's very low, right? You know that I'm living, this certain way and I can only afford this. Get it. I understand completely. But if you're looking for something a little more efficient, I would suggest at least more of a full supplemental plan, because if you pick at least the right plan, then you could look at the Medicare supplement plan covering the other 20% that Medicare won't pay for, even though they approve. Because Medicare will pay for 80% of whatever they approve, but they're not going to pay the other 20%. And the other thing a Medicare supplement plan could do is it could potentially cover that elimination period. What am I talking about? Well, we talk about rest homes. We talk about long-term care. We talk about living needs benefits. Well, when I first got in this business in insurance, Randy, 20 plus years ago, we talked about long-term care because that was one of the licenses I got right away. It was about 50% of people needed care in the future at that point. Now getting closer to 2/3 of people need care in the future at some point in their life. Obviously, if we all, when we die, we all would like to just drop dead, right? It would make our lives a whole lot, everybody else's lives a whole lot easier, right? It would be so much easier. Yeah. But truthfully, people need care. I mean, I'm staring down the barrel at some things with my mother-in-law. I'm staring at some things with my mother, and we know that we've got to pray, and we also have to take action. So when you look at a supplement policy, what can happen is Medicare could cover potentially the first 20 days of care, but a supplemental policy, if you pick it, not only do they cover the other 20% of what Medicare doesn't cover but approves, but they could potentially cover the next 80 days as well. And an elimination period in a long-term care policy or a long-term care annuity or a living needs benefit annuity, usually they have an elimination period somewhere around 90 days. So that could also make a big difference, just for coverage purposes. So these are important conversations to have. Now, I'll tell you this. If you want alternatives to long-term care, there's plenty of them out there. We have long-term care annuities where you put in premiums and you have multipliers for the potential of needing it for long-term care. And we also have living needs benefit annuities and life insurance policies where they could provide benefits later on, but they can also be a good asset for you to own. So this way you don't have to necessarily pay for these insurances, but maybe just invest and then use them for that specific purpose later on if it's necessary. If not, it's there for you. So these are the conversations we like to have. And like I said before, do I have all the answers? No, but I have some incredible professionals around me, and we can get answers for you.
Well, the healthcare situation and questions are big. You get to 65, you get Medicare, and you feel, whew, I made it. I don't have to be on my employer plan anymore, and I hear Medicare pays great. Well, there's some twists and turns that go along with that as well, and certainly Medicare, Medicaid, these things, they don't cover everything, and Medicare does not do long-term care. That's, you'll get about 100 days maybe into this, but then it's all on you, and you got to start writing checks. Do you have some protection there as well? So these are big questions, and there are answers, and there are options out there for you to look at. Mark can show them to you. MoreToRetire.com is the website. We encourage you to go there today, learn more about Mark and the team, and get a date on a calendar. Let's confirm this. Maybe it's after the first of the year. That's fine. I know this is really busy right now, but you're going to be starting to think about financial stuff at the beginning of the year, because that's when taxes start becoming top of mind for us. You start gathering all of your receipts and all of your information together. Why not have a retirement meeting at the same time? MoreToRetire.com or 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984. All right, it is said that half of today's 5-year-olds will live beyond the age of 100. That's amazing. The people at Morgan Stanley were talking about that, and they said, it's not just then helping people plan for a longer lifespan. It's helping them plan for the expenses that they're going to have as they get into their late 80s and their 90s. And that means maybe outfitting the house with some helpful aids, maybe having somebody come in 3 times a week or every day to check in on you. All of this stuff costs money. So let's talk a little bit about that, Mark. Planning for people who live a very long time. When somebody walks in, let's start here. What is the age that you usually plan to? I hear 90 or 95 is usually the age. Is that about where you are?
I do. Personally, I like to plan for people to age 100.
Okay.
I'll just share a story with you.
Sure.
Years ago, I wrote a life insurance policy on a client of mine in their 70s. They had a lot of health ailments. We were able to get them standard. And she really would always tell me, since her husband had passed, she just really wanted to die. But she was living life. She still loved the Lord and it was moving on. But she had a lot of health ailments, right? And I thought, there's no way. I'm just going to plan for the life insurance policy on the guaranteed portion to be at 100, but we'll project to well past that, right?
Okay.
Well, it started underperforming on the regular side because this was a universal life policy and interest rates dropped. And interest rates, as we know, were historically low for a number of years. And when this stuff happens, these insurance companies have to change things and shift. So I knew this is definitely going to last to 100. But if it gets past that, the family members are going to have to make sure that she adds another premium to keep this death benefit. And it was a single premium life insurance policy. I didn't want her to have to add anything more, right? What we had put in, she ended up getting double the death benefit. I just didn't want her to add any more. Well, I started sweating bullets because she was getting older and older, and she went to a nursing home, and she ended up dying before she was 97, almost 97 years old. But I was concerned because I thought, oh my gosh, if I have to have this conversation, how are they going to feel about this? And so I always plan to 100 because I just feel more comfortable. I have clients come to me and say, I'm fine with 90. I'm fine with 85. I'm not getting past there. And they surprise you all the time. So prepare. And you know what? Inflation's a big part of that, like pig. Preservation, income, and growth. And if we're going to prepare for income, prepare for inflation, and prepare for taxes too.
Well, this is one of the big issues. People say, I won't live past 85. And then a call comes to Mark. Mark, I just celebrated my 86th birthday. And you may not live that long, but what if you do? And you need to have the income to go along with that, and certainly the things that you're going to need in those later years, the income to afford them. Best to have that in place, and let's talk through that. Give Mark a call. It's 984-300-1984. If you have a grandma who's like 98 years old, it might be in your genes. 984-300-1984. All right, we're going to close today's show by talking a little bit about Social Security. Another year has gone by, and Congress has done nothing to solve the Social Security insolvency program. This is E.J. Antoni on Fox Business, and he's talking about their failure to act is really going to change this program, not only for you who are getting ready to retire, but for the people who are in that phase thinking, I wonder if it's even going to be there for me.
Look, for a lot of you folks, the system is not going to look like, at the time of your retirement, it's not going to look like what it does today. That's just the reality. We're not having enough kids. The population is not growing fast enough. Specifically, the number of working people is not growing fast enough. And if you're going to keep a Ponzi scheme going, which, structurally, that's what Social Security is, it relies on an ever-growing increase of people paying into the system to pay for today's retirees. If you're not going to keep that growing, that population, that working group, then you are going to have to make structural changes. That's the math.
All right. So once again, someone sits down in front of you and says, well, Congress isn't going to do it, so I guess I will. What does that mean? I got to make up for a 22% cutback in Social Security when that income goes away. I got to have something to fill that in. What's that conversation look like?
This conversation comes up with me because I truly believe until they fix the darn thing, we're going to have problems, and we got to be prepared for them. So you prepare your fields, just like it says, in the Bible. We just have to be ready. And so if we realize they haven't fixed the system now, and we're getting to 2032, 2033, we realize they haven't fixed it then, well, then we better adjust and prepare for that drop of potentially 20 or plus %. And if we do that, we can work around this. So obviously building other income provisions, not relying just on Social Security, would be very smart. I have some clients that just say, you know what? Let's prepare for the income and let's have the Social Security just be the gravy. I say that's a pretty smart plan. So let's have this conversation where do we build the income from? And I had a guy come to me recently, and he was talking to me about needing a certain amount of money in retirement in addition to all the other areas. And I said, okay, that's a substantial amount of money. I said, do you want to get some kind of rider feature, that like a guaranteed lifetime income rider with an annuity, and understand maybe what that percentage of or how much money would take to pay that out when you want that in like 3 to 4 years? He said, yeah, well, let's look at maybe half of it doing that. Because if we do that, then you might have a little bit better feeling about what you're doing with everything else. You see, he had has a lot of money in real estate and some other areas. So that's part of the conversation we have there, and we're having that conversation right now because you know what? If you don't have that feeling and understanding of, well, I know that money's coming in. I know that money's coming in. Because Randy, an annuity is just a fancy term for a pension, or a pension is just a fancy term for an annuity. A pension is immediate annuity, right? But we're not talking about immediate annuities. We're actually talking about deferred annuities, actual investments where you can grow the money, but you can put this rider on there, and that rider feature is a lifetime income rider, and it's built to provide income for you or you and your spouse for the rest of your lives. And if there's money left over, we'll pass to the beneficiaries. So this is a little different than an immediate annuity, which only counts as income. So these are the conversations we have because maybe you want to look at a portion of your assets in this area because you need that provision in place so you don't have to rely on other areas. Like we talked about, sequence of returns. If you're relying on just the market, if there's a correction or a downturn and you're taking money out of that, we call that the double whammy, and you don't want to receive that in retirement.
Well, I mean, it can be where you look at it and say, how can I get another $600 a month that I'm going to lose in Social Security here? Or it could be something simple. I'm Mr. Smarty Pants. I'm going to pay off my house in the year 2033, which means that when Social Security cuts, I'm going to be able to take that money from what I was paying on my mortgage, and that's going to go into my income pocket. So aren't I Mr. Smart? But I mean, that's a simple answer to the question. There's probably some more complex answers to that question too about getting income out of what you've saved for retirement. That's a conversation where you sit down and you work the numbers and say, okay, let's look 5, 6, 7, 8 years into the future. Then let's look 10 years into the future tax-wise. Then looks 15 years into the future when I start to age and need a little bit of help. It's constantly looking forward and saying, what are my needs going to be when I get to that point? And it's a hard thing to do. I mean, right now, if you were to say, what are my expenses going to be 5 years from now? That's hard because there's probably stuff out there that you don't even know that you're going to be paying for that hasn't even been invented yet or something like that. Give Marc a call. Let's talk through your retirement. What is your needs right now and what they might be in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. 984-300-1984 is the number. 984-300-1984, or find online moretoretire.com. And Marc, we have just a couple of minutes here because you have your 5 steps to more. Kind of give people an idea what happens when they call and sit down with you. What are the steps there?
Sure. So you can combine steps 1 and 2 pretty easily with just a treetop view and discovering your retirement desires and what you want to accomplish, right? So it's important. If you go to my website, moretoretire.com, you'll realize that we have a secure upload button to the right-hand side. That's where you can send me statements where we can do a financial report, run that report, and we could do that in the first and second steps and kind of combine those. Some people take more appointments than others. I'm very open to what is necessary and what is needed for the person. It's very important. So eventually what we do is we implement step 3, which is really putting together a plan and identifying certain things, and then you become a client. Step 4 and step 5 is, we're going to have some adjustments, switches, and changes over the years, and we're going to have ongoing support. But yeah, you're going to have to be willing to make adjustments and switches and changes when it's necessary, just based on conversations. If you don't like something or I don't like something, we have to, because life is ever changing. But if we talk about preservation, income, and growth, it's all a big part of that. And we want to prepare for those things. And you mentioned inflation earlier, Randy. Now's the perfect time to prepare for a percentage of inflation now, because we just went through massive inflation.
Yeah.
And if you hadn't planned for inflation years earlier, beforehand, you would have got hit hard. And these are the conversations we have years in advance.
And we talk about negative changes, but what if there were positive changes? All of a sudden you go down to Florida where you've gone for 2 weeks out of the year and you say, Marc, I kind of like to spend 2 months in Florida. Okay, there's an extra expense. That's a change. And we build that in. And so some of these things, we just got twin grandchildren. Oh my gosh, that's going to be an expense. That can be some fun stuff too. So the changes can go both ways. The important part is you've got that ongoing support that Marc talks about. This isn't a one one-time, meeting and relationship, and we give you a financial plan and you walk out the door. There is ongoing support as you go through your retirement years and the changes that go along with it. Give Marc a call. Give the team a call. Let's sit down and talk about your retirement. The Marc Oslar Retirement Experience, 984-300-1984. 984-300-1984, or the website, moretoretire.com. Have a great time out there facing the crowds and Christmas shopping. We're getting down to the deadline here. We'll be here next week, and we hope you will be too, on the Marc Oslar Retirement Experience.
Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. Marc Oslar Retirement Experience is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through Impact Partnership Wealth LLC, a registered investment advisor. IPW does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Marc Oslar Retirement Experience are not subject to investment advisor requirements. Investing involves risks, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims paying ability of the issuing carrier. This radio podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be considered as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual situation. Marc Oslar Retirement Experience is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during the show shall constitute legal or tax advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein are provided by third parties that have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Marc Oslar Retirement Experience. Market Guard is a firm that provides investment signals as well as portfolio allocation recommendations for a wide variety of model portfolios. Market Guard does not offer advice or enter into fiduciary relationships. Please remember that converting an employer plan account to a Roth IRA is a taxable event. Increased taxable income from the Roth IRA conversion may have several consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA.